taking place. We can speak live now to Katie Bitten. Katie, you're the Programmes Manager at the humanitarian charity RedR, and also joining us is Noorullah Kuchai, the Technical Programmes Coordinator for the same organisation. And Katie, let's start with, because you support people on the ground. Have you ever seen anything like this in terms of the magnitude of the destruction that we're witnessing?
Thank you, and thank you for having us here today. The scale of the devastation and destruction is really indescribable, and even as a humanitarian organisation with a longer history of responding to these types of crises, the scale of the damage in a region that was already had very high humanitarian needs has been very devastating to see, and we are working very hard round the clock to meet needs as quickly as we can.
Of course, because that area of Syria already very much devastated. Let's just bring in Noorullah, because Noorullah, as the Senior Technical Programmes Coordinator, you are assessing, you're hearing the technical detail of what is on the ground. When the engineers talk to you, what are their main concerns in terms of the safety of the buildings, and why we just saw so many of them collapse to such an extent, given that Turkey, this part of the world, is renowned for earthquakes?
Thank you very much for having us. The problem is that buildings respond differently in the earthquake, so it's a bit too early to comment on why were they collapsing why so many of them have collapsed. But what RedR is doing is utilizing its role as a bridge and hub between the engineering and the humanitarian sector. We are currently coordinating with national authorities, humanitarian clusters, community-based organizations, and we are bridging this gap of knowledge. And one of the main needs that has arose from these coordinating meetings and discussions and assessments is the lack of capacity. That's what we are trying to do, the rapid capacity development of engineers there on the ground to be able to do the detailed damage assessment of these buildings.
So, Katie, how do you first of all get in touch with all of these people? Are they aware of RedR, of the works that you do? How does that initial communication work? Because as we're seeing there, people have nothing, not even an access to water. Where do you even start?
Yeah, for sure. So RedR UK is we're an international NGO and learning provider. We have worked in the humanitarian sector for over 40 years now, including in the Middle East. We had an existing programme in the region on damage assessments and structural detailing and how buildings respond to disasters like this. So we already had a very big network of partners and trainers and engineers on the ground, some of which we had already trained. We are obviously rapidly scaling up that work in the last week to provide technical support, training and assistance to those engineers through our existing networks, really. We are receiving hundreds of requests for support, engineers on the ground and organisations who need support and assistance to assess those buildings and hopefully get back into them safely. The scale of the infrastructure damage and the impact this is having on people is really massive. It really goes beyond kind of bricks and mortar, really. The secondary impacts of further collapses, in particular for rescue workers and affected people, is a huge risk, especially when aftershocks are continuing. Lack of kind of safe shelter puts people at huge risk as well from exposure in conditions that are still very severe winter conditions, really, and then lack of access to critical infrastructure as well, hospitals, schools, roads, schools. Is worsening, existing health needs. So it's a really critical need for these engineers and technical expertise. As I say, a lot of whom we were already connected with, and we have very strong links with both the engineering sector and humanitarian partners on the ground. So we are just rapidly trying to meet those calls for support, really.
Katie, it's really good of you just to remind us of the conditions there, because the temperatures dropped to below minus. It is bitterly cold. There is a lack of so much there's basic stuff that people need. But for the time being, Katie Bitten, Noorullah Kuchai from RedR, who supports engineers on the ground. Thank you so much. Good luck with your work.